This portion of the news was recorded today at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time and translated here at C-SPAN. It's about 35 minutes.
You're watching Primetime News of Radio Television Serbia. Respected viewers, the aggressor NATO alliance this morning, early in the morning, bombed the fuel storage facility about 10 kilometers from Sombor, as well as the oil refinery of Novi Sad. The target of the aggressor also was the area of Grocka. Two missiles of the NATO alliance hit the Ritopek area. The anti-aircraft units close to Klina downed the NATO plane A-10 Thunderbolt, announced the Regional Intelligence Center. The announcement of the power company of Serbia says that by cutting off electricity supply to hospitals, bakeries and water centers, the aggressor has caused a humanitarian disaster throughout the country, depriving citizens of their basic needs of water, bread and health care. In yesterday's bombing of the most important power facilities in our country, when the aggressor destroyed the power plant Nikola Tesla A, and later that evening 3 more electric power facilities in Niš, Novi Sad and Drvno near Kostolac, and the missile attack a day earlier on the thermoelectric plant Kolubara A, the aggressor has severely crippled the power supply of Serbia. This destruction, together with earlier ones, both physical and by means of fiber bombs, on 5 other facilities, have deprived all customers of regular electric supply. But the destruction of these plants has also affected the largest power plant, Đerdap, the thermoelectric plants in Obranovac and Kostolac, as well as the one at Kolubara A, which severely affects the electric energy supply to all parts of the Republic. Given the continued danger of new disruptions in the power sector, it is essential that consumers abide by the appeal on rational use of electricity. In Novi Sad today around 3:45 in the afternoon, one could hear 3 strong explosions from Fruška Gora mountain. At about 3:55 in the afternoon, 5 more explosions came from the Novi Sad refinery. This was the 15th attack so far on the refinery. Today around 4 p.m. the aggressor NATO alliance attacked the area northwest of Užice. There are some civilian injuries as well as damage to many civilian buildings and homes. The evil alliance at 3:30 in the morning attacked also the area of Ritopek in the Grocka county, about 20 kilometers southeast of Belgrade. One missile hit a family home in that neighborhood, destroying it completely. This morning at about 3 and 3:15 respectively, there were 2 series of explosions east of Sombor. The aggressor NATO alliance attacked the storage facility of Naftagaz, already attacked before. Enemy this morning also dropped its deadly bombs on the area between Sremska Mitrovica and the village of Manželos. In Sremska Mitrovica, at least 10 strong explosions were heard. The anti-aircraft units of the Army of Yugoslavia downed on Kosovo yet another aggressor plane, A-10 Thunderbolt, announced the Regional Intelligence Agency. On Macedonian territory, 3 unmanned aircraft of the aggressor have fallen, down by the brave members of the Yugoslav anti-aircraft forces. An intelligence drone, Hunter type, crashed near Blace on Yugoslav-Macedonian border. Representatives of the alliance in Skopje acknowledged the crash but did not say if the plane was hit. In Tetovo area near Suva Gora, 1 more surveillance drone fell near the church of Sveta Petka. This explosion caused panic in the surrounding villages. The crash was confirmed by the German contingent of the NATO troops in Tetovo. They said that this was an unmanned plane of Canadian production. 1 more unmanned plane fell in Western Macedonia between Tetovo and Gostivar. The crash of this plane was confirmed by the new spokesperson of NATO in Skopje. As in all cases so far, alliance representatives gathered all of the parts of the debris before Macedonian government bodies could conduct any investigation. In the repeated bombing of the prison Istok over the past several days, according to our data, about 100 prisoners were killed and about 200 suffered serious or lighter injuries. As the Regional Government Committee of Kosovo notes, there is fear that the number of casualties is even greater. Among those dead and injured, there are some employees of the prison, including the deputy director who was wounded. The evacuation of those wounded and other prisoners has been precluded by the continued threat of new bombardment. An action is underway to relocate the inmates. Taking advantage of the bombardment, a number of inmates fled through the broken walls, says the announcement. The Kosovo issue can be solved only by political means, which is the goal of a growing number of diplomatic initiatives. This was noted today by the Foreign Minister of Russia, Igor Ivanov, who announced for this week a series of moves to bring this issue back towards a political means of resolution. In the response to the journalists' queries as to whether America has brought up the question of a forced change of the Yugoslav government, the Russian Minister Ivanov said that his government doesn't discuss such issues with anyone since they're completely outside the boundaries of legality. Igor Ivanov added, all of this is pointless waste of time. If we want to really bring peace to the Balkans, we have to begin seriously deal with negotiations, not to wait for someone to leave or to arrive or change his opinion. The three-party discussions between Viktor Chernomyrdin, the Finnish President Ahtisaari and Stroop Talbot on the political ways of resolving the Kosovo crisis will continue on Wednesday in Moscow. On Thursday, the special Russian envoy for Yugoslavia and the President of Finland should travel together to Belgrade. Martti Ahtisaari says that it is essential to include the Yugoslav party in these negotiations. This is the only way to resolve the problem successfully. At the same time, seeking a peaceful political solution, it is necessary to coordinate the efforts of Russia, India and China, because they're all interested in this issue. This was stated by Chernomyrdin at the end of his meeting with the Foreign Affairs Minister of India, Singh. It's important to bring about principled decisions because we cannot tolerate the behavior of the West. It is difficult to lead negotiations while the bombardment is intensifying, said Chernomyrdin, stressing that the negotiations have to continue because their end would be a catastrophe. The help that Russia gets from China and India, or should get, is very important for Russia, and India completely agrees to this. The conflict in Kosovo, according to Foreign Minister of India Singh, is not a matter of the Balkans, but of the world as a whole, which means including China and India, whose positions on this crisis completely coincide with those of Russia. However, the anti-NATO Commission of the Russian Duma believes that Russia's actions towards peaceful resolution of the Kosovo crisis are inadequate to the scope of NATO's aggression on Yugoslavia. The memorandum distributed today in Duma notes that Russia has not undertaken all available means to exert pressure on NATO countries, such as sending a fleet to the Adriatic Sea or preventing pro-NATO propaganda by some Russian media. The Commission demands a full re-examination of the Russian politics towards the Balkans. The Patriarch of the Russian Church, Alexei II, calls upon the Slavs to remember their common roots and prevent a fratricide. Today, in front of the monument to Cyril and Methodius in Moscow, he called upon Slavs to strengthen their ties in order to prevent new division of Europe and the world. China called Europe to wake up. In this NATO aggression, Europe is serving American interests and going against its own. The leading Chinese paper, Zhengming Zhibao, warns that Europe is heading towards a disaster. It has witnessed 2 world wars and now allows a 3rd war in the Balkans to take place. The paper, which expresses the official views of Beijing, warns Europe that this is war waged on its soil. America is far from the flames. Zhengming Zhibao says that the dissatisfaction because of this war is growing throughout Europe. and there are more and more divisions within the NATO members in Europe. The Greek Prime Minister Simitis, addressing the members of the Greek Socialist Movement, asked for an immediate end of the bombardment. The Greek Archbishop Christodoulos said that the criminal behavior of NATO and the violence against innocent civilians shows the dumbing down of the Western Christian mind that ignores the history of an entire nation. Athens reports that the Foreign Minister of Greece and Czech Republic, Yorgos Papandreou and Jan Kavan, during their Beijing meeting, appealed for a ceasefire in order to give chance to diplomacy. The commander of the Air Force of Russia, Anatoly Kornukov, stated that Russian leadership is considering the possibility of additional funding for combat components. Everyone empathizes with a country attacked by missiles and bombs. Thus, a united anti-aircraft defense system of the Russian Federation will be a strong deterrent to any aggression, stated General Kornukov, adding that the first steps towards the new integrated system S-400 will be taken soon. There are more and more French who are against the aggression on Yugoslavia, despite the fact that the Paris government denies there is war against the Yugoslavs. Paris wants to calm down the population, which, despite the strong anti-Serb media campaign, believes in the friendship between the Serbs and the French people. The government also tries to hide the fact that this aggression violates the French constitution since it began without a consultation with the parliament. British military analysts say that the war in the Balkans is at a turning point. Daily Telegraph stresses that NATO could soon end up in a quagmire. NATO has very few reasons for optimism, says Daily Telegraph. The public opinion in these countries, and especially in Britain, and the public as a whole, will demand answers as to why so little was explained to them regarding this war. The commentator focuses on the dissent within NATO, whose leaders are losing patience with the so-called all-knowing Britain. The German Chancellor Schröder doesn't hide his irritation with British speculations about ground troops. It is similar with France and Italy. The opinion of the British public is shown through a recent TV debate on Channel 4, in which NATO was indicted for gross mistakes in a misguided action. Those accusing NATO made strong arguments calling for a response from NATO leaders and spokesmen. The jury, made up of the viewing public, voted last night with great majority that NATO is guilty. There is no defeatism amongst the Yugoslavs and the Serbs, writes today's New York Times, noting that the courageous Yugoslavs know that behind this brutal aggression there is no humanitarian concern for the Albanians, but an effort to conquer and occupy part of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavs are unified, adds New York Times, continuing with the truth about the Kosovo crisis that U.S. media barely mention, that at the center of the crisis is a terrorist and separatist movement in Kosovo, which Serbs continually tried to explain. Commentators do not dare, however, to condemn the brutal NATO campaign against Yugoslavia that destroys the whole country. CNN, as one of the most powerful of these media machines, showed the images of the destroyed power plants and relay stations, which were purposefully destroyed by NATO bombs. In their comment, they make not even a passing criticism against such brutal methods. This cold-bloodedness, though shown by all U.S. media, is countered by the images themselves. These images, despite the silence of NATO's leadership about the real reasons for this war against a sovereign country, do affect the ever more concerned public in the US, which, according to latest polls, feels that the crisis must be resolved by diplomatic negotiations. The Milano daily Corriere della Sera writes that Yugoslav heroes number the technicians from the power plants who, after each NATO strike, managed to return light to the homes of the Yugoslavs. The Spanish daily Diario 16 claims that NATO war will enter history as a completely unnecessary one. Instead of the anticipated quick victory, NATO unified the Serbs. The European public opinion is against this war. We have to find peace soon. It is disliked only by arms traders. The Iranian foreign ministry expressed concern with the continued air attacks and demanded an immediate political solution. Pakistan sent a protest note to the US and other NATO countries because of the recent damage to the Pakistani embassy in Belgrade. The Communist Party of Japan and the Japan Democratic Alliance condemned the NATO attack on Yugoslavia. Leading news in Japanese media are the growing peace initiatives towards the resolution of Kosovo. They point to the civilian suffering in Yugoslavia and the ever more frequent mistakes by NATO. The member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Živko Radišić, noted in Prijedor that by killing innocent civilians and destruction of centuries of cultural accomplishments in Kosovo and throughout Yugoslavia, NATO cannot destroy the spirit of Serbian people. And this is what he said about NATO's aggression on Yugoslavia and the use of the airspace of Republika Srpska. This is a war without a precedent, without an example in history. That one country, one nation is attacked without any reason. Because what they mention, that they're doing this in order to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe, can only be an excuse, an ungrounded story. Because it's clear, at least, what's behind. This is not a war for Kosovo or because of Kosovo, but against Yugoslavia, against the Serbian people as a whole. This is a war on the territory of the entire Yugoslavia. War not against armed forces, but against people, against all of the economic, social and other resources. What do you as a president of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina think about that despite the decision of the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska, that is to say, despite the fact that there was no such decision, there is aggression against Yugoslavia and use of your airspace. I want to say openly that the use of the airspace for attacks against Yugoslavia is really an assault on the sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that all of the authorized government bodies in Bosnia and Herzegovina did not give their consent about this. So this is an abuse on part of the international community and their implementation force within Bosnia. I'm talking about SFOR as peacekeeping forces and their mandate. Their mandate was not to be directly or indirectly supporting military actions in the neighboring Yugoslavia, but there were examples of that nature already, where SFOR has gone beyond its mandate, such as their behavior in the roads, putting everything under military control. The most drastic example, of course, is the destruction of the railroad in Štrpco on the territory of Republika Srpska, the railroad Belgrade-Bar. We condemned that, but I'm not sure that SFOR and other international institutions learned what we wanted to tell them. Throughout the world, there are continued protests against the aggression of NATO on our country and humanitarian initiatives to collect assistance. In Paris, there was a humanitarian concert, One Night for the Children of Yugoslavia. It joined Yugoslav and French musicians. The proceeds of 70,000 francs will be used for medicine for the children of Yugoslavia. There were demonstrations today in Vienna, Stuttgart, Stockholm, Bratislava, Vancouver, London, and other cities. From the beginning of the aggression on our country, Serbs and Yugoslavs in Britain hold daily protests in front of the seat of Blair's government in Downing Street. These protests that take place both day and night for 24 hours are organized by the British Serb Alliance for Peace. Its co-presidents are the great patriots Marko Gašić and Misha Gavrilović. Its main organizer is Boban Đurđević. The protests bring not only our people, but more and more frequently British people who oppose Blair's politics, common citizens as well as members of the House of Lords, anti-war organizations and journalists. More and more often, journalists stop at this site after the briefings in the British government to hear the other side. That these protests irritate Blair's cabinet is confirmed by the constant pressures on the organizers not to schedule these protests. This is what some participants say. We have to persevere. The country will be free. We will have our Yugoslavia, Serbia and Montenegro. NATO will have to withdraw, and we believe that justice as always will win. But we have to be constantly protesting, explain what is happening in reality, and fight for our people everywhere throughout the planet. Dominique Chabosh, Vice President of the National Front of France, stated in the French Parliament that the resistance of the Yugoslavs against NATO goes beyond national struggle. I am ashamed of being French and that my country participates in this dirty war, said Chabosh, stressing that the National Front does not accept the present politics of the French government. One should not equal politics with the nation, stressed Chabosh, adding that the French public is assaulted by misinformation. Upon returning to France, the National Front will do its best to tell the French people about the truth of what is happening in Yugoslavia, said Chabosh. The Executive Council of the regional branch of the Socialist Party of Serbia for Kosovo stressed that despite this fierce aggression of the NATO criminals against our country, there is great unity among our people to defend their country. The heroic struggle against a technically far superior enemy and terrorist Albanian gangs testifies to our determination to follow the policy of President Slobodan Milosevic, which defends peace and common life in this country. Politics that does not accept blackmail and protects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country. The Executive Council of the regional branch of the Serbian Socialist Party for Kosovo added that our army and police forces have shown decisiveness, courage and professionalism in defending their country from a much more powerful enemy. The Socialist Party of Serbia, as the strongest political entity in Kosovo, is fully in service of the defense of the country. Its Executive Council for Kosovo reiterated that the problems in the southern Serbian province can be resolved only by political means, with consistent application of the laws and constitution of Yugoslavia and respect for the principle of equality of people and non-interference in internal questions of our country. The Serb Radical Party announced that the criminal NATO machine, headed by a think tank of world mafia and hardened killers with Clinton at its helm, has for 2 months been inflicting an unprecedented genocide over the Serbian people, with its brutal destruction of everything our people built for many years. Under the excuse of destruction of military targets, the enemy alliance continues day and night, as true murderers do, to show its monstrous face by attacking homes, hospitals, neighborhoods and power plants, convinced that it will destroy the high level of Serbian unity, morale and determination not to allow occupation of territories that have always been Serbian for centuries. In this war imposed by the will of world bosses, we have to persevere. Serbian people have never lost a war for their fatherland, despite the many attempts by world conquerors throughout history, concludes the Secretariat of the Serbian Radical Party. At the conclusion of the last Congress of the Italian Communists, the Milanese paper Corriere della Sera stresses the message of the President of the Yugoslav left, Professor Mira Markovic. Aside from thanking the President of the Italian Communists, Armando Košuta, for his efforts for the resolution of the Kosovo crisis, the message of Mrs. Markovic expresses hopes that the Italian Communists will continue to press for peace. We hope that our sacrifice will be the last one in Europe, that the world will do everything possible to bring about peace, concludes the message of Dr. Mirjana Markovic to the Italian Communists as cited by Corriere della Sera. We expect the government of Yugoslavia, without awaiting further diplomatic initiatives, to demand an urgent call for a session of the UN Security Council and adoption of a resolution in accordance with the UN Charter and the principles of the G8 countries for an immediate end of the aggression, notes the Serbian Renewal Movement. Aside from the many war crimes by NATO in this aggression on Yugoslavia, over the past few days, they have hit hospitals, prisons, power system facilities essential to civilian life. Thus, NATO leaders proved that Nazis were little children in comparison to some of the NATO generals, stressed the president of the Democratic Party of Serbia, Vojislav Koštunica. He criticized Montenegro and its president Milo Đukanović, who during an aggression on Yugoslavia, the country of Montenegrins as well, is concerned only with his own power. Even with this war, our state tries to function whenever possible as if in peacetime and prepares itself for the economic renewal ahead. This is confirmed by the following report. The Minister of Finance, Dragiša Pešić, gave certificates to representatives of 40 banks with pledges that the government will pay off outstanding debts by the production sector to these banks. The law on transformation of the economic debt into a public debt was adopted in the Assembly about a year ago for the amount of about 1,500,000,000 dinars. Minister Pešić stressed the importance of the banking sector for the economy and the living standard. The measures of the federal government are crucial to the agricultural recovery, stressed the Minister of Agriculture, Nedeljko Šipovac. If we pass through the fields, if you look at the farms and the livestock stalls, we see that almost every foot, every acre of our land is being used, that our spring sowing activities were very successfully concluded. Based on these results, we can expect enough food also this year. The governor of the National Bank of Yugoslavia, Dušan Vlatković, also addressed the meeting. He stressed the improvement of the financial discipline, bank liquidity, and the stability of prices in our currency. He announced some changes in the hard currency business procedures and an increase in the minimum capital for banks from the $1.5 to $5 million, which should help integrate smaller banks into stronger financial institutions. The Council of Serbian Unions sent an appeal to all unions around the world to stand against further destruction of Yugoslavia, that is, the total war of NATO against the civilian population of our country, the destruction of our electric power plants, so as to stop the functioning of hospitals, emergency rooms, blood transfusion centers, bakeries, food coolers, and other essential facilities, endangers the basic human rights and freedoms, stresses the appeal of the Serbian Union signed by its president Tomislav Banović. The Minister of Health, Dr. Leposlav Miličević, speaking of the medical consequences from the latest assault on our electric power system, stressed that those most endangered include 4,000 kidney patients receiving dialysis. Also endangered are all of those patients depending on medical instruments, whether babies in incubators to those most seriously ill in the intensive care units. She added that the healthcare system is doing everything possible to alleviate the consequences of this unprecedented humanitarian disaster. The South Banat County Plandište became today a permanent home for 28 families that in 1995 had to flee Croatia. Their new homes in the villages of Miletićevo and Veliki Gaj have good yards, and 23 families of farmers got about 46 acres each. One family member in each family that doesn't work in the agriculture has been given a job. The homes were built with the help of the Serbian Commissioner for Refugees, the Swiss humanitarian organization SDR, the UN Commissioner for Refugees, and the Plandište County. I have to tell you that this war aggression of NATO against Yugoslavia destroyed over 80% of our refugee facilities. One other settlement, just as beautiful as this one, but in the southern Serbian province of Kosovo, unfortunately no longer exists. I hope that nobody will continue to bomb neither the residents of the president of a sovereign country, nor refugees in their columns, nor their new homes, nor the babies who have just been born. I hope that in this world that has shown itself to have two spheres, one human and one inhuman, that the human sphere will win, that it will have more reason and emotion for what lives and exists and defends its own. The Plandište County will be home to 16 more houses for refugees from former Yugoslav republics. The settlement into these homes was attended today by the Vice President of the Assembly, Mr. Ilkic, Deputy to the Serbian Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Renadovic, the representative of the Swiss humanitarian organization SDR, and representatives of the surrounding districts. The relay station of the private radio station Elma Radio on Bjelasica is no longer on. The programs of that station cannot be heard in Kolašin, Mojkovac, Berane, Andrijevica, Bijelopolje and Plava. The representatives of the Elma Radio said that this was due to a decision of the Ministry of Information of Montenegro. The ministry says that they're talking about a principal decision regarding radio frequencies in Montenegro. But the radio officials respond that this radio station used the Bjelasica relay for 4 years with all appropriate permits of the Montenegrin and Federal Ministry of Information. Delegation of the Journalist Association of Republika Srpska in Serbia said today that the Serbian journalists are unified in their fight for truth about the suffering of the civilians in this unprecedented war. The delegation of the Journalist Association of Republika Srpska, led by Mr. Vožić, visited today the Journalist Association of Serbia. On behalf of the Serbian journalists, the Milorad Komrakov, president of the association, thanked his colleagues from Republika Srpska. He said that journalists of Serbia are not alone because they have the support and understanding of many colleagues throughout the world. But the closest collaboration we get is from those across from Drina River. We are all Serbian journalists. We came here to give all of the Yugoslav media and journalists our unreserved support in their determination to defend their country. Both of these journalist associations condemned the arrest of Dragomir Bečirević from Politika in Podgorica and asked for the freeing up of Mr. Knežević, who is also imprisoned. Both of these journalists will appeal to the International Journalist Federation in Brussels a request to organize a new journalist conference about the attack on the media in Yugoslavia. The members of the delegation also visited the ruins of the television building in Belgrade that was attacked on the 23rd of April, and they gave their respects to those who suffered. All of the activities regarding the completion of the school year at the University of Belgrade are taking place according to the instructions from the Ministry of Education. Students will have nothing lacking at the end of the school year. Professor Dr. Jagoš Puriš, who is the president of the university, spoke about the activities of the university during this 2-month aggression, saying that all of the employees gave their support in order to win over this aggression of NATO. It was also stressed that the university in Belgrade is completely involved in all of the programs of the Education Ministry and the Economy Ministry of Yugoslavia for the upcoming renewal of the country. The entry of students in the next school year will be done in accordance with the provisions of the Ministry of Education about 15th of July. The new school year will begin on November 1st. The entry exams for the high schools for 1999-2000 will be only there for specialized schools. For all of the other high schools, the only criteria will be the success of the students from grammar school and their particular qualifications for specific areas in which they want to continue their education. This was said at the press conference of the Education Ministry. On the occasion of the Day of the Slavic Literacy, there was a celebration in honor of Cyril and Methodius. The brothers of Thessaloniki, Cyril and Methodius, in the 9th century were very important Slavic teachers. Constantine, that is Cyril, created the first Slavic alphabet, the Cyrillic, Glagolica. Their students continued their work and created the Cyrillic alphabet. Tens of millions of Slavs are using these letters today. And we are the heirs of the Cyril and Methodius traditions, said Dr. Željko Simić, the Minister of Culture in the government of Serbia. The heritage of Cyril and Methodius from the 10th century on until today has been what has made our people members of the great civilization that comes from Byzantium. The Slavic brethren, Saint Cyril and Methodius, served both religious, cultural, and political interests of their people and of the ruling elites of their time. They served them in a manner that makes them very important historic personalities, respected because of their appeal towards the good and brotherhood of all of those created by God. The program was also attended by Dr. Dimitrije Kalezić, Bojko Đorđević, Mirjana Vukozić, and others. The International Film Festival of Slavic and Orthodox people was opened in Smolensk in Russia. This year's festival is dedicated to the resistance of the Yugoslav people against the NATO aggression in these tragic days. This Slavic Film Festival has simply, with its love, supported the Yugoslav people, not closing the doors to the cinematography of our country pushed into such unjust war. This was stressed by Nikita Mikhalkov during the opening ceremony. Stop NATO. This is the title of the multimedia project organized by the Association of Yugoslav Artists that shows the works of artists from over 20 countries protesting the aggression. Everything that the artists could send by means of the internet has been exhibited here. Our artists respond by performance art and other events. The contact is simply based on the same mission, strong anti-NATO opinion. You cannot bring down any bridge. Every bridge, especially this one, is above time and death. All bridges that are destroyed are never destroyed. They remain in our consciousness. And these are bridges towards others because they will always be there, above life, above death, and above evil. In the next few days, from the gallery of the Artists Association of Yugoslavia and in front of the gallery, many artists of Yugoslavia and other countries will continue to send their appeal. There are not too few. We hope that NATO will manage to hear them eventually. The 25th generation of students at the Belgrade University marked their anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the Student Cultural Center, Student City. Student Culture Home has its 25th anniversary. On that occasion, there was a special meeting today of the governing board. The meeting was opened by Professor Miloš Jeničijević and the director of the Student Center, Mirko Maksimović. It was stressed that from the day when the Student Center was opened 25 years ago, they tried through their various programs to be the place where young people can spend their free time, regardless of whether it's education or cultural programs. The House of Culture, Student City, will continue to support its audience. And this is the best recognition for its work so far. Given the difficult situation that our country has to live through, the House of Students is celebrating this anniversary in a very modest way. They were especially grateful to the Army of Yugoslavia and stressed that the dignity of our people are the best response to this aggression.
For more on the military action in Yugoslavia, click onto our website, where we have a section dedicated to that topic. You can watch the daily Serbian newscast and other relevant events like Pentagon and State Department briefings. Our address, cspan.org. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.